Hey guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. Before we go straight into today's case, I do have a content warning for you guys. In this video, we do talk about sexual assault, and it also goes without saying that we don't shame sex workers on this channel. So if that's not something you think you're interested in watching, then this video probably isn't for you. So maybe you can watch some of my other videos or just wait for my next upload. On Sunday the 9th of October 2022, Damien, a care worker for a panel beating workshop in Joburg, CBD, got to work around 8 a.m. with his 4-year-old son. He greeted the security guard on duty, and then he decided that he wanted to wash his car, so he was going to go into the building to just go look for some supplies, a bucket, get some water and other things that he might need. So he got into the building, got to the first floor, and as soon as he opened the door, he smelled something terrible. Immediately, he started looking for where the smell was coming from. He went into the first office and nothing. He went into the second office and nothing. As soon as he opened the door for the third office, he knew where the smell was coming from. And he saw something, and immediately he went outside, went to go get the security guard, and just asked the security guard to come with him so that he could just confirm if what he was seeing is indeed what he thought it was. The security guard then went with him. They got to the third office, and the security guard confirmed Damien's thoughts. And that was that he had just found a decomposing body. The security guard then called one of the tenants who rents from the building, Mark Kumalo, and told him what they had found. Immediately, Mark got to the panel beating shop and he saw this body, and immediately he just knew that something was wrong, and he kind of just had this inkling that his son had something to do with this. And this is because his son, Sifiso Mkhwanazi, had recently been released from prison for allegedly R-wording someone. The security guard then told Mark that his son would often bring women to the panel beating shop on Saturdays or Sundays, and sometimes they would see the woman leave, but other times they wouldn't necessarily see the woman leaving, but they just assumed that they had left. After this, Mark decided that they had to go fetch Sifiso, so he and the security guard got into his car and he called Sifiso and just told him that he needed a key for the panel beating shop, for the workshop. And Sifiso didn't mind, and after this, Mark said that he must wait for them at the gate. I'm not too sure what gate this is, where Sifiso is staying or where they all stay together, but Mark drove there with the security guard, and once they got to the gate, Sifiso was there waiting for them. And as soon as he saw his father and the security guard, he kind of knew that something was wrong. Maybe he could tell by their faces or just their body language, and he tried to make a run for it, but he really didn't get far, and they just grabbed him and put him inside of the car. And this is when they drove back to the panel beating shop, and this is where they confronted him. Sifiso denied having been at the workshop the previous Sunday, like the security guard said, and at this point they had already called police and they had arrived on the scene. So because Sifiso had denied being at the workshop the previous Sunday on the 2nd of October, they decided to have a look at the CCTV footage, Mark and the police officers. So they pulled up the footage and they saw Sifiso at the panel beating shop on the previous Sunday, and at around 6 p.m. he left and he returned about an hour later with an unidentified woman. After a while, they just saw them go into the third office, and then the lights went out, and this was because of load shedding. A couple of hours later, they see Sifiso leaving the panel beating shop, but the woman never leaves. Sifiso kept denying that it was him on the footage, and he told his father and the police officers that it was his ghost. The police did not search the entire warehouse because they probably didn't think that there was more to it. They had been called for this one body in this one office. It was a single incident. Also, the warehouse is extremely massive, and a lot of it is unused, being unrent, is not being rented out. So they just focused on this one office, did what they had to do, and then they left. After the police left, Mark, and I'm not too sure who else, decided to clean this office, and at this point the body had been taken away. And it's also said that because of how badly decomposed this body was, she had kind of like melted onto the floor. So the best decision they had for cleaning this office was to first hose it down. And they also did this because the office wasn't like your stereotypical office. It kind of looked like a storeroom. It was cemented all over. The floors were like kind of tan. The floor was cement, so it just seemed like their easiest option to do. And as they were hosing down this office, Mark needed to go to the bathroom. And I'm not too sure why he did this, but then he just decided to follow where the water was going. And as he was following the water, he saw this big vent that's kind of linked to like your air conditioners, but not like those air conditioners you have for like your house, like those small ones. It's a pretty big vent, and probably because the warehouse is so massive, so you know, it had to cover the whole building. So he sees this vent and he kind of looks under the vent, and this is when he finds another body. Mark then called police again, and once they got to the warehouse, they searched all of it, and this is when they discovered 4 more bodies. In total, 6 bodies were found, all in various stages of decomposition. One that was found was in the 3rd office. The second one was in a bin under the big vent. 2 were found in these big municipality bags, and 2 others were found in 2 different cars. And then 19-year-old Sifiso Mkhwanazi was arrested. So let me tell you guys about Sifiso. Sifiso was born in 2002. His exact birth date hasn't been made public. Sifiso was raised in Soweto by his mom, and he has an older sister. The 2 of them do share a father, and their father is Mark Khumalo. Mark is originally from Uganda, and he is a polygamist. It's said that he has multiple wives, but I'm not too sure whether some of them are like his wives and others are just like his partners, so I'll just refer to them as his partners. So in total, Mark has 4 partners, including Sifiso's mom. So he has Sifiso's mom, and together they have 2 children, Sifiso and an older daughter. Then there is another woman, and they have a 6-year-old daughter. And then there is another woman, and this is the one that he currently stays with in Fortsburg, and she is Tanzanian, and they have 2 daughters together. And then his 4th partner, she is also from Uganda, and I'm not too sure if they have 2 children aged 6 and 13, or they have more than 2 children aged between 6 and 13. So yes, that is Mark Khumalo. As I mentioned, Sifiso was raised by his mom in Soweto, and Mark wasn't really a part of their lives. Sifiso only started to get to know more about his dad in 2012, when his dad started coming around more often. Sifiso was also raised Muslim, and this is because Mark is Muslim. Unfortunately, in 2017, Sifiso's mom did pass away, and it's believed to be by a heart attack. And then after this, Sifiso's life kind of did a 180. He grew up in Soweto with his mom and his sister, and he just had like a typical upbringing. He went to a normal school, and I guess like just a normal kid stuff. But after his mom's passing, his dad wanted him to work at the paddle beating shop full-time, and at this point the paddle beating shop was doing really well. I'm not too sure how it's doing now after everything that has happened, but back in 2017 it was doing really well. But Sifiso did not want to leave school and just start working full-time at this paddle beating shop. So they kind of reached like an agreement, or like middle ground. So Sifiso then started going to a Muslim school in Pretoria, and this Muslim school only focused on religious texts. They didn't have any circular subjects like your maths, science, business studies. And after a while, he then went to another Muslim school in the south of Pretoria. But unlike the first Muslim school, this school did have circular subjects, and Sifiso really enjoyed maths and science. Around this time, the big C word happened, COVID, and everything was shut down. Like schools, people had to stay at home, and Sifiso had to do that. I'm not too sure whether he finished school or he didn't, but in 2020 he was 18 years old, so he was either in grade 11 or he was in matric. According to Sifiso, he has never really been in a relationship or has had a girlfriend, and he says this is by choice and it's for religious reasons, which is a bit interesting because growing up there weren't really like a lot of red flags, or there weren't any red flags really in Sifiso's behavior. And in 2019 he started seeing sex workers, and in 2019, he was around 16 or 17 years old, and he would pick up sex workers about 2 to 3 times a year. So I say it's interesting that he hadn't or has never been in a relationship for religious reasons, but he still goes and sees sex workers, which is also frowned upon in his religion. The first indication of troubling behavior in Sifiso's life was in 2021, and this is when he was arrested for allegedly R-wording a sex worker. So he says that he had picked up a sex worker, and once they were done with the deed, she demanded more money from what they had initially agreed on, or what she had said is like what she wanted. And Sifiso says that she just said that she wanted more money because she saw that he drove like a nice car, had taken her to this warehouse, so it meant that he had money, so she wanted more money. And after this, they kind of just had like an argument, and he ended up not paying her that extra money that she wanted. And then 2 days later, police officers went to the warehouse. They asked for Sifiso, and then they told him that a woman had opened a case of the R word against him, and then he was arrested. Sifiso then spent the next 10 months in jail, and this is without bail. And after those 10 months, the case was withdrawn, and then he was released. And he claims it's because of this particular incident that his hatred towards sex workers began. Sifiso was arrested in June 2021 and released in April 2022. And he claims that his first murder took place during Eid of the same year. And in 2022, Eid was on the 2nd of May. So Eid is a major Islamic holiday where Muslims celebrate with prayers, feasts, and acts of charity, either marking the end of Ramadan or commemorating a sacrifice. And Sifiso specifically remembers this murder because on this day there was a family function, and they sent him to the warehouse to go get something. And he said that as he was making like this quick trip to the warehouse, he decided that he wanted company, so then he went to pick up a sex worker. Sifiso says that he would pick up a sex worker because he wanted to engage in sexual intercourse, and he would pick them up, then they would go to the warehouse. And once they were done with the deed, sometimes the woman would demand more money because of the car that he drove, or they just assumed that he had more money than he was letting on, and then they would kind of argue about that. And then they said that if he didn't give them more money, then they would go to the police and they would cry the R word. And he said that once they would argue about this, or they would say that, he kind of got reminded of when he went to prison for those 10 months and he did not want to go back, so then he would decide to kill them. He does say that sometimes he would pick up a sex worker, they would go to the warehouse, and then the woman would just leave, like they wouldn't give him any issues, and then he would just let them leave the warehouse with their lives. So if they did argue with him, he would then strangle them until they lost consciousness, and then once they lost consciousness, he would hold them in a chokehold until they lost their lives, and then he would kind of tie rope or cloth around their mouths, their hands, and this was because he wanted to pull them so it'd be easier to pull their bodies away so that he could hide them. What is interesting is that 5 of his 6 victims were strangled, however, 1 was shot in the head. Tshego was shot in the side of her head. Sifiso says that he did this because she started demanding more money, and she said that she knew that he could pay more, and this is when he told her that he was coming right back. He was going to go get that extra money that she wanted. He then went into his dad's office and he went to go get a gun, and he says that he knew his dad kept a gun in his office because there was this one time where his dad was with one of his friends, and the friend kind of asked Mark like where he kept his gun, and he said in the office, and that's why he knew there was a gun in the office. So he got to the office and he opened, I don't know whether it was a drawer or a safe, but he opened that thing and he saw 2 silver guns, meaning that one belonged to his father Mark and the other belonged to his father's friend. He then took one of the guns, went to where Tshego was waiting, and then just shot her in the side of the head. When asked whose gun did he take, he says he's not too sure because both of them were silver. He also claims that he did not clean up the area, but police officers did not find any shell casings or anything like that. Tshego was not Sifiso's first or last victim, so the fact that he used a gun is quite interesting. Some people believe that maybe he was still trying to figure out what kind of method he enjoyed killing with, and maybe he realized that he kind of liked strangling because it is kind of intimate, for lack of a better word. It takes about 5 minutes for someone to die whilst you're strangling them, and maybe shooting them was too quick. Some people believe that maybe he was like in a rush, he didn't have time for it, so he just kind of went and got the quickest thing that he could think of, which was a gun, because he knew it was going to be fast. Or some people think that maybe he used the gun and then he realized that it was too loud and he wouldn't get away with it. But either way, he did this once and then he just went back to his preferred method, which was strangling. After Sifiso shot Tshego, he then placed her body in a black trolley bin, which was hidden outside in the yard. Tshego was a single mother to 4 children, and she was described as a kind and loving woman. Her children were not ashamed of what she did for a living because they said that she had no one to rely on, no one really helped her, and she just did the best that she could do for her children and just to try and make a living for them. They said that Tshego had been missing for about 3 weeks, and this is when her oldest, her name is Paledi, she received a phone call from police to tell her that bodies had been found and asked her to come and see if she could identify her mother. So she got to the scene, and this is when they told her that she wouldn't be able to look at the bodies because they were too badly decomposed. And then she had to describe to the officers just her mother's identifying marks, like told them that she had artificial teeth and told them where she had tattoos, And then after this, I think a couple of days went by, and then police officers called Pauline again and told her that she and her siblings had to come into the police station so that they could take some DNA tests and just try and confirm that one of the bodies did belong to Chiota. And it took about 6 months, but they did receive a phone call that one of the bodies did belong to their mother. Unfortunately, in December of 2023, so just last year, Chiota's third born unfortunately took his life, and this is because he just couldn't deal with everything that had happened to his mother, and he just couldn't deal with that loss. One of the victims was strangled with an arm choke, and once she lost consciousness, Sifiso took a sock and wrapped it around her head and her mouth. He then took a yellow rope and tied it around her neck. He stuffed her body in a white duvet and then placed her body in a white truck. And when asked why he put her body in this white truck, because obviously the car had its owner, he said that the car had been there for over a year, so he kind of knew that the car was still being worked on and the owner wouldn't come for the car anytime soon. Another victim was strangled with an arm choke, and once she lost consciousness, Sifiso took a blue cloth and tied it around her head and her mouth. He then took a black belt and tied it over the cloth, and then he took her body and placed it in a white truck that was outside on the yard in the premises. Joyce Moyo was strangled, and once she lost consciousness, Sifiso took a cloth and tied it over her nose, mouth, and neck. He then placed her body in a transparent plastic bag and placed her body outside and just put some scrap metal over it. Patricia McGuiser was strangled until she lost consciousness, and once she was unconscious, Sifiso took a cloth and put it over her face. He then took a rope and tied it around her neck. He then placed her body in an oil drum that had old oil in it, and then kind of placed it outside the yard, and that's where it was later found. Sifiso strangled the last victim with an arm choke, and once she lost consciousness, Sifiso put a rolled up part of a cardigan in her mouth and wrapped the same cardigan over her mouth and neck. He also covered her face with a t-shirt and wrapped a pair of leggings over the t-shirt. This is the body that was found in the third office. She had been there for exactly 7 days when she was found, and unfortunately this victim was pregnant. When they did find her, her body was extremely bloated because of the decomposition gases, and it is these gases that pushed the fetus out of her body. So when she was found, the fetus was found next to her. There are reports that 2 of his victims were pregnant, but they haven't stated which of his other victims was pregnant. Also, the order of the murders has not been released, so what we do know is that the first victim found was his last victim, and that's all we really know. And we also know that Chiota was not his first victim or his last victim. She was somewhere in between. During the investigation, police officers found sex workers, or some other sex workers came forward, and they told police officers that they had seen or been picked up by Sifiso. There's one particular instance where he had picked up a sex worker. They went back to the warehouse, and once they got there, she had started undressing, and Sifiso just kind of looked at her strangely and just told her, you know what, it's okay, get dressed, I'll still pay you. And when asked about this, Sifiso said it's because as she was undressing, he noticed that she had sores on her body, or like these kind of marks, and because of this he thought that she wasn't healthy, so he just told her to get dressed and then dropped her off and still paid her. There was another sex worker that was picked up by Sifiso, and she says that once she got into the car, Sifiso demanded her phone, and he was very aggressive and pushy about it, and she didn't want to give him her phone, and they kind of like fought over it, and then she opened the car door and jumped out. Sifiso says that he knew that he was going to be caught eventually, and he just thought that there was something wrong with him. He says that after the first murders, he was so scared and he just kept asking himself how he was going to stop it. And he says he didn't know why he would take the girls to the warehouse, because he knew that if they were found, it would kind of be linked back to him easier. And also he says that he knew there was CCTV footage, so the chances of them seeing him with all these girls was very likely. So he kind of knew that it was inevitable, but that didn't really stop him. Monk Khumalo, Sifiso's dad, testified against him and said that he wanted to see justice done. Sifiso Mkhwanazi is a serial killer, and he could be the youngest documented serial killer in South Africa. A person is classified as a serial killer if they commit 3 or more murders over a period of time. And the youngest known serial killer before Sifiso was Moses Sithole. Although he was an adult when he committed his crimes, he committed his crimes in his late 20s and early 30s. And Moses Sithole is also known as the Hammer Killer, and he was convicted of 38 murders. I have covered his case before if you are interested in that, and I'll link it somewhere up here. I'm not too sure which side. Sifiso did not want to plead guilty to the charges against him, but he did make a formal admission in terms of section 220, and this is where he basically agreed to certain things that she did but kind of deny other things. So Sifiso says that he did murder the 6 women, but he says that it wasn't premeditated, it was kind of spontaneous, so that is why he does not want to plead guilty. He also was charged with the R word, and he says that he did not R word the women. He says that it was consensual and transactional, so that is also why he did not want to plead guilty. But either way, Sifiso Mkhwanazi was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison on the 18th of September 2024 for the murders of 6 sex workers between April and October 2022. In addition to life sentences for the murders, he was also sentenced to 170 years for rape, defeating the ends of justice, and illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. The court found Sifiso Mkhwanazi to be a dangerous criminal with little chance of rehabilitation and ordered his case to be reviewed after 30 years. Unfortunately, 3 of his 6 victims remain unidentified to this day. And that's it for today's case. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out my channel a lot, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.